Welcome. Today's build is a fairly well-known type of build, and that is a solar bonk hammer titan. Now, there's been some changes to the build since the recent nerf to the bonk hammer build, but it's still an incredibly strong build and one I highly recommend. So the gameplay loop of this build is very simple. Get a kill with the solar ability. I prefer to use a fusion grenade first, but you can also use your throwing hammer, and then you will get stacks of a buff called Roaring Flames. Now, Roaring Flames buffs your solar abilities and refreshes every time you get a kill with a solar ability. So because you have infinite throwing hammers, as long as you pick it up and wait I think it's 1.4 seconds for it to charge back up, you're going to be able to just spam it over and over again, killing lots of enemies and generating lots of orbs. Because of our mod setup, you're going to generate as many as an orb a second, and that's going to allow you to get lots of super energy very quickly, especially in combination with our double hands-on mods, which I'll be going into later. In addition, you don't have to continually use your hammer to get kills. Now, the hammer's great because when you pick it back up after damaging something, you get Cure, which is going to heal you for a small amount, but that's not necessary for you to use all the time because you're going to be using Restoration, and that's going to be getting extended on every kill. One thing that's very interesting about the build since the recent nerf is they amended how Roaring Flames works so that while it's active, your uncharged melees are considered charged melees and activate everything that entails, including hands-on mods, Orb of Power mods, reactivating Radiant, so on. In addition, your uncharged melee will also apply 30 Scorch stacks. So with Ember of Ashes equipped, that's going to be 40 Scorch stacks, but since we're not using Ember of Ashes, that's going to mean an ignition every 4 uncharged melees. The Scorch does not apply to the throwing hammer, so just be aware of that. And that's going to play heavily into how this build works. Obviously the subclass we're running is Sunbreaker, and I've decided to use the super Burning Maul because first off this is a very powerful super. Continued hits with it using the heavy attack are going to stun enemies, and it does just a lot of damage. If you're bothered, you can also set it up so that you can swap your exotic to Pyrogale Gauntlets just before you activate the super, and then it's going to get the benefits of Pyrogale Gauntlets, at which point you can swap back and then carry on attacking people. You don't need to do that because the other exotic we're going to use is going to buff your super anyway, but it is worth noting in certain content as that's something that you can do and is worth doing in certain things like damage phases. So for our abilities, I'm running Towering Barricade just because I don't really use the barricade that often, but having the ability to drop down cover is very useful. High Lift, because I like High Lift, although most people would probably suggest Catapult Lift for the initial boost of speed, as this can help build momentum and allow you to go through places quicker. I just like High Lift because I'm really bad with Titan Lift, so I like the extra ability to be higher so I don't miss and die. Throwing Hammer, because this is basically what the build is all about, and I like Fusion Grenade because of the short cooldown and just generally being a good grenade. On to aspects, so I briefly mentioned it before, but we're running Roaring Flames. Final blows with solar abilities or ignitions increase the damage of your solar abilities stacks 3 times. So anytime you get a solar ability, final blow, or an ignition, you're going to reset the timer and increase the stacks of Roaring Flames up to ×3. I have noticed in playing this build a lot that ignitions seem to be bugged. If it's bugged on an enemy, then it's just not going to work. Usually it works, but I have noticed this, especially when doing damage to bosses. The other aspect we're running is Soul Invictus, and this is going to create sunspots, which, while you're inside, are going to have your abilities regen faster, your super drain slower while you're inside one, and they scorch and deal damage to targets. This is also how you're going to get restoration and extend it later on. Moving on to the fragments. Now this, I'm going to preface this with, this is a team-based build. This is not a solo build. So that's heavily played into the fragments I'm running. So let's have a look. Firstly, I'm running one of the most important fragments of this build, and that's Ember of Benevolence. So applying Restoration, Cure, or Radiant to allies grants increased grenade, melee, and class ability regeneration for a short duration. Now, this is a 400% increase, which is absolutely insane, and that's why I'm running this. because everything we're doing is going to be melees. And so in combination with Ember of Torches, we're going to be giving ourselves Radiant and our allies Radiant once a second. So hypothetically, Ember of Benevolence is going to be up constantly, meaning all of our abilities are going to generate incredibly fast. The other fragments that I've chosen are Ember of Empyrean, which is going to extend Restoration and Radiant, allowing us to keep our survivability up as long as possible, and Ember of Searing, which is going to provide more melee energy, just something that you could be used in a pinch when you do lose your throwing hammer, and creates a Fire Sprite. Fire Sprites, if you are not aware, also grant grenade energy when you pick them up, so that's great. Also, the extra recovery is nice, can't complain there. So if it isn't clear, the point of the build is to get stacks of Roaring Flames until you get to 3 stacks, getting close to enemies, kill them with melees, generate orbs every second, get lots of supers, use those supers, and all the while doing so, giving your allies Radiant and increasing your ability regen an insane amount. So in terms of armor, mods, and stats, I'm going to start with the stat distribution. Now, 100 resilience, absolutely non-negotiable. You're going to be up in every enemy's faces. They're going to have lots of opportunities to melee you, as well as other things, stomp mechanics, absolutely necessary. And then basically everything else is up to you. I went for 70 discipline and 82 strength, but it's really completely irrelevant because all of your stuff is going to be regenning incredibly fast. So you might be better off using recovery or intellect, just so you can get all those things back as quickly as possible as well. But if you are worried about not having the initial throwing hammer or the initial grenade to get Roaring Flame stacks, have these higher. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at the exotic, and then we'll go back through the armor in order for the mods. So the exotic we're running is Syntheseps. Only looks good if you use this ornament, just saying. But what it does is when 3 or more enemies are around you, you gain a bonus to your melee damage and a bonus to super damage. So the melee increase is 165% increased damage, and the super damage is, I believe, a 50% increase. And yeah, improved weapon handling and reload speed. We're not using weapons in this build, so that doesn't matter. Onto the mods. Our helmet, we have Harmonic Siphon, just because if we do use a weapon, it's useful. Although sometimes I run one of these, Powerful Friends or Radiant Light, just to give my allies some kind of buff when I'm using my super all the time, which I will be because I'm getting all the kills most of the time when running this build. And then 2 hands-on mods, because that's the maximum that you can stack to get the most. I think it's 2.5% on every melee kill instead of 2.3% or something along those lines. And since we're going to be killing everything with your melees, this is obviously the most important. Onto Syntheseps again. This, we have just gone for 3 heavy-handed mods because we're going to be killing everything with melees. You get the idea that with the new cooldown system on these mods, that's 1 a second. So you basically don't have to worry about it because you can't even melee faster than that anyway. Chest, resist, legs. I'm running recuperation for extra healing because unfortunately restoration ×1 is not as good as it used to be. I'm running orbs of restoration because we are dropping a lot of orbs, and also because I like this because it means I can improve every single one of my abilities, although it does go to the one that is lowest at the moment, and so that can change depending on, you know, when you get the ability energy. I just find this to be the most useful for this build particularly, just for ability regen. And then 1 solar weapon surge for when we do use weapons. Typically I'll be using it only on my heavy weapons, but it doesn't really matter. And then lastly, onto the mark. This one I'm running Bomber, just because I couldn't run both Bomber and Outreach. Reaper for just another way to get orbs, and then Time Dilation. This isn't really necessary because generally speaking all the orbs will be coming from our melees, but if you prefer you can run Outreach or someone else. Moving on to the weapons, this is really irrelevant. I mean, this build is powerful enough to kill champions without even stunning them. I mean, you literally don't necessarily need any of them. However, this is my favourite 3 weapons at the moment. So I'm just running Sunshot for, you know, exotic primary, synergy with the build, generally a really fun weapon to use. Apex Predator, because why not? Or a bait and switch one, if I want to do the most possible damage. And then Scatter Signal. These will obviously change when you do actually have to pay attention to these, but yeah, apart from barriers, which you're going to have radiant all the time anyway, so you'll have ways to deal with it. All of these can be killed without even stunning them with this build. It's just crazy. Very powerful. Some other good weapons include Zauli's Bane, I like without remorse, and the Ikelos shotgun as well for 1-2 punch. That is a great point actually. 1-2 punch shotgun like Wastelander up in here would be really useful because obviously we're doing melee damage and any increase that we can have is going to be perfect. But you don't really need it. It's that powerful. Moving on to artifact mods. In the first column, it's whatever you like, whatever's needed for the activity. And then we're running all the solar artifact mods for the rest of it. So, Kindling Trigger. I like From Whence You Came, because that's what every enemy is this season. Flint Striker, Heart of the Flame, Wished Into Being, Revitalizing Blast. I also sometimes run Unraveling Orbs, but right now I'm running Overload Rocket Launchers, Razor Precision, and Argent Ordnance, just because I'm running a rocket launcher. But you can obviously run something else if you are not. Lastly, Drip. So this one's actually a pretty easy one. Very lucky that these colours all work together. I really like this sort of general Titan aesthetic with the sort of Halo-esque helmet. And everything's going on here I really like. I really like how it's black with the red at the bottom of the arms and the legs, because that makes me feel like I am literally roaring with flame. And apart from that, I just think it looks pretty cool. Sometimes I run it with this. These are my favourite legs, but I just don't like how this is red. It would be better if it was just this red. So that's why I am running these legs. Very good colour scheme. Gives me Halo vibes and I love it. And that is everything for the build. Thank you very much for watching.